right, Avery, we have a doozy of a show today. An absolute doozy. I think everybody knows what we're going to be talking about today, which is, of course, that PGL Wallachia is going on. Very exciting tournament.
That's right. A lot of Muerta picks. I called it. It's going to be a Muerta patch. I'm very excited
A lot
about
of Muerta picks.
I like this hero.
Has there actually been?
I think this hero is going to be the carry of the patch. I'm making a bold prediction right now.
Why?
What do you mean, why? Super strong hero. I don't even know.
I haven't seen a single Muerta pick. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Have you watched the tournament?
Yes. There's been literally several Muertas, and they've all done well.
I see.
You are just out of the loop, brother.
5 Muerta picks.
Yeah, that's 40% more than like the entire previous year combined. It's on the rise. I'm not saying it's top right now.
2 and 3.
I'm saying at some point in this patch, it's going to be a top tier pick. That's all I'm saying. You can quote me on it.
All right. Yeah, well, you did also say a lot of Muerta picks. I would describe
that is a lot for that hero.
5 is not a lot.
Above 0 is a lot for that hero historically. I'm just saying. So.
All right. Well, when, the most popular heroes such as Shadow Fiend is being picked 23 times, I feel like, that's a lot of picks. But
whatever.
All right.
Whatever, bro.
All right. Calm down, Avery. We don't want to get into an altercation here. All right. I know your anger runs hot. All right, so everybody is probably already knows what we're going to be talking about today. So PGL Wallachia is going on. It's a tournament. It's a post-TI tournament. So it's also a tournament that happens at a terrible time for me. So I wake up, first thing I do is watch the last series of the day, maybe the last game of the day. And that's all I've really seen of the tournament until one morning I woke up and the first thing that I saw, I get on Twitter and immediately I see a post by @PGL Dota 2. Avulus has been issued a level 3 penalty for the entire series against Falcons. Minus 110 seconds bonus time on draft following an altercation between SoNNeikO and ATF in the hotel lobby. We condemn this behavior as it goes against value sportsmanship, blah, 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 blah. So that was the news that broke. And it was just like, okay, this is a weird thing that has happened yet again, as this was not the only altercation that we've had this year, or even the last couple months, as we had the Fishman and 9 class altercation that also happened, right? Supposedly,
we don't really know what happened with that one.
You could say it was an altercation because the man got fined like $10,000. So, that's something obviously happened.
We just don't know. We don't know.
Sure.
Unconfirmed. So,
all right. So there are 3 chapters to this little piece of drama that we had for ourselves. First chapter is the release of PGL's statement and the clarification from Amar that happened. Which Amar's statement is, he says, just to clarify what happened today, 3 months ago, I was playing a ranked game against SoNNeikO. During the game, I called him brain dead. After the game, he sent me a threatening message on Twitter, which I took as banner. Today, he approached me in a hotel lobby, put his arm on my shoulder, and SoNNeikO started threatening to punch me and put me in the ground, XD, to which I replied, please punch me. He just stood there, kept threatening me, despite Avulus manager, coach, and players trying to get him to stop. Anyways, I guess he did this because he can't beat me in game. So, of course, Amar, if he's going to be involved in any sort of drama, is going to twist that knife just a little bit more and mock whoever is involved on the other side of it. So
you want to talk about this thing in chapters or whatever, right? There's like 3 parts to it. So chapter 1, what is this? Like this is like Batman Begins. Like the foes appear. We'll get to the other of the trilogy later.
I don't think we want to put it that way because that would put Amar as the protagonist.
No, I'm not saying who's the protagonist. Protagonist is probably like Gabe Newell, who's sitting there raking in some extra money from his game being promoted. I don't know who is. I'm just saying. In chapter 1, okay. I feel like there's been a lot of takes on this. I don't want to repeat what all these other people have said. I condemn violence. Physical violence is never the answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, but it's never the answer, and it should never come to that in a modern society. I also feel like there's a lot of takes on the other side of it of like, well, you're an instigator if you're trash talking online, and Dota makes you say incredibly toxic things and blah, blah, blah. And like, oh, it's just in-game chat and whatever. I understand that point of view too, but I will say there is like an asterisk on all of this, which is like, if you are one of those guys who's in these pubs just trash talking everybody for years on end, saying like ruthless shit, at some point you're going to hit the wrong motherfucker, you know? And it doesn't mean you did something wrong, but like you're playing a numbers game, because at some point you're going to get someone out there
wrong. To be clear,
yeah,
you are doing something wrong. Maybe you don't deserve a physical consequence.
Exactly. It's not. Yeah. It doesn't justify someone coming and harming you. But like you're playing you cannot control everybody out there, right? You're playing a bad numbers game. Eventually, you're going to hit the bad lottery. It's going to come back and smack you in the head. So it's one of those things where like, does it justify it? No. But to say it's not a cause is like you're ignoring a big part of it, right? And I also want to say that it would be one thing if ATF shit talked somebody, the person came, threatened violence against him, and then ATF was like, this guy was threatening violence against me, holy shit, I need help, I need protection, I regret triggering this guy off or whatever, right? That's a possible situation. But to me, it doesn't really seem like that's what happened, to be fair. It seems like he trash talked the guy. This guy got really pissed. He confronted him. There was some threats of violence or physical handling or whatever. I believe that probably happened, whatever. SoNNeikO can argue his intention or not. We don't know. Only he knows. Only the people there know. Honestly, is probably there. I'm not going to debate that part. But then this guy goes on. He makes the statement you read. Okay, ATF makes a statement. And in his statement, he then antagonizes him again at the end of the statement. This is the part that I'm surprised nobody has talked about. Because to me, there's two things here. One, if I had actually felt threatened that this guy was going to enact physical harm against me, my immediate reaction wouldn't be to then go on Twitter and further antagonize him, doing like the same shit I just did, being like, ha ha ha, you couldn't hurt me then because I had backup or whatever, and you're not going to do it now, so I'm going to antagonize you third. Like, if this guy's actually a real threat to you, why the fuck would you antagonize him further? That is the dumbest thing you can do. And if he's not a real threat, then you're kind of blowing smoke up people's ass because now you're just trash talking him more, right? It's like the dog behind the fence that's like barking really fucking loud, and then you like open the fence and he's like, "Oh, what's up, bro? Like I'm chilling. You close the fence." It's like that, dude. You know,
it's actually every Dota player conflict is the GIF. You've seen it so many times. There are two dogs on two different sides of the gate. They're just going crazy at each other. You open the gate and then they're just like, no, we're chill. We're good. We're good, bro. Then you close the gate again and they're right back at it again. That is the internet. The internet is the gate.
So this is just obviously there's a lot of subtlety in this. I'm not debating all the other parts of the argument of like, there shouldn't be violence. There shouldn't be. It's not what Amar did doesn't justify physical violence or the threat of physical violence or whatever. But like, if this actually happened, like people are saying, why is this guy going on Twitter and then instantly further antagonizing this dude?
Well,
clearly,
he has
no remorse, no common sense, or whatever they say happened didn't actually happen because he's not actually afraid of the dude or whatever. So, like, which the fuck is it, right? That's what I'm sitting here wondering. Like, that is just bizarre to me. Like, the fact that he did that is just so absurd. I can't wrap my head around it.
I just can't. I think there could be another answer to it, in that he thinks, like, in the world that he thinks that there is some threat of physical violence, that his pride doesn't allow him to back down, and he has to have the last word. You know, that he just has to go and say something, or he doesn't think he's actually a threat. Like, yeah, this guy's gonna throw a punch, but you know, it's not actually gonna hurt. It's not actually going to do any damage, you know. Like, I could take him in a fight. Dude.
You can't sit there asking for this team to be disqualified because they physically threatened you with violence and you felt like that was going to happen, and then at the same time be like, haha, but you can't beat me in games, sucker. Like, I don't think you can do both those things. I'm just saying. That's the one aspect of this whole thing I call it. Like, I just don't think you can do that. All the other stuff I agree with. Should they be DQ'd? Yeah, if that actually happened, if he actually threatened him or whatever, just DQ the fucking team. Like, get him out of there. It's unacceptable.
And
but I just don't think you can like ask for that and then also be like, I'm still going to make fun of you and antagonize you because you can't do anything about it. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like,
yes.
what is that, dude? Like,
well, I would say the asking for DQ thing isn't necessarily coming from Amar, because there was a push from the Team Falcons organization who said that they issued a post. It is way too long for me to say anything, but the TLDR is they recap what happened from Amar and Falcons side of things, and they are basically pissed that PGL didn't disqualify these guys, saying that they should have been issued a more harsher punishment. There should be zero tolerance for this sort of thing. And they publicly call on PGL to remove him from the tournament. And if they don't, they're going to rethink whether or not they want to go to PGL events. Now, I think I find it kind of interesting that they are going to rethink, and they're not actually saying, if you don't remove him, we're not coming back to your events. I have to assume that part of this is because it's coming from the Falcons organization and not necessarily from the team. You know, so if the team still wants to go to PGL events, right? It's not like the org's going to be like, well, no, you can't. But I saw that one of the Falcons, organization members, one of those guys high up in the chain, tweeted about it, said he was insanely mad about it. So obviously they were involved in some way. So there may be a little bit of discrepancy here between what the team and the player wants in Amar and what the Falcons, the organization wants. So it is possible that Amar is not the one calling for SoNNeikO to be disqualified, But I agree with everything else you said.
I just think that point of it, outside of all the other points, that to me was like the absurd part. It's just like,
yeah,
the fact he went straight back at it, it's just like a double down. Fuck you. It's like they're just trash talkers, man. These guys just like to trash talk. They can't help it. He's gonna do it no matter what. Nothing's gonna stop him. That's what I've come to learn.
True. This obviously went pretty viral. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are making memes about it. And other pro players picked up on it. And there was a number of people who had their say. One of which, of course, a friend of ours who always needs to have his say. That is that's one of the things that probably gets him in trouble so much, was Quinn. Quinn put out his own statement about it, basically saying that anybody defending Amar for defending SoNNeikO rather for threatening Amar, anybody who thinks Amar deserves any sort of violence for the shit talk that he does in pubs and stuff like that, is wrong. And there's a completely different there's a big difference between words and physical threats in real life. It's insane and dangerous to conflate the two. Do you how do you feel about Quinn stepping in and having something to say?
I mean, about him stepping in or what he said. Those are two different things. I think there's definitely some arguments Quinn should just stay on the sideline, because I told him this too. I messaged him. Not that anything he did or said is wrong. I also told him that, like, I'm not his fucking parent or teacher or some shit. I'm just some unbiased dude. But this one in particular is like kind of bad for him, because obviously he has a history of being one of the worst and most toxic pub trash talkers of all time. So it's like, even if your point is correct, it's hard to go into that sphere when you have that part of your reputation and not like rile people up against you or whatever you're saying by default, right? Because people are going to see like, how the fuck can you talk on this when you were the biggest trash talker? Which isn't a logically good argument, but like, it's an emotional one, and people are emotional creatures. So like, you have to understand that, and it makes sense. People
who want to make the worst out of Quinn will say that he's only putting these things out to defend his own actions and his shit talking, and make sure he doesn't get any sort of violent reaction from somebody.
He can't defend that. Like, there's no way to defend that, because you'd have to believe his intentions or not, and the people who don't automatically won't. So it's a bad it's a bad contextual place for him to engage in this arena on. Like, he just doesn't have a much emotional ground to stand on with the community, put it that way. Regardless of whether his arguments are logically sound or not, right? So that's like one thing, is I think a lot of people in high profile situations like this and whatever they want to speak their mind because they have personal experience, which is also why they want to do it, which could be a good thing. Like, it's if you see someone like the Taiga situation, right? If you were a player who had been involved in the past with match fixing scandals or offerings or gambling or whatever, you're pretty tempted to come out and like speak your mind during that whole thing, regardless of your relation to Taiga, because it's like I have personal experience on this, whatever. But at the same time, if that's public knowledge and whatever, it skews people's opinion of what you have to say just by default, and you have to understand that bias is going to exist. So it's like a give and take. I think in this situation, though, the issue is that there's a lot of like nuance to these arguments, and because there's a lot of emotion caught up in a lot of the nuance, that you're never going, like when you engage in an argument online in the internet, it's really hard to get your context and the nuance of your beliefs on an issue across. Like it's just kind of hard to do in text. And so you're always usually going to end up angering like a fourth or a fifth of the people in the debate, because they're just going to be like, well, of course this and this and this, even though maybe you would agree in real life. So that's another part of it, is like these online debates are honestly just so trash. I think they're just bad. I think even my saying that is going to cause people in comments to be like, that's a bad take. And it'll only prove my point of like how bad a lot of times online debating is, because it's just like, you can't read the person. You can't read how they're saying things, sarcasm, irony, like the subtleties of conversation, right? All these things are generally lost, and it's just some blanket quote, and then you have to take it as a blanket quote. It's like, I think this is bad. And that doesn't necessarily mean the person thinks it's bad in 100% of situations all the time. Like, obviously, there's a lot of exceptions and context to everything, but you can't lay all that out in an online debate. So it's like, I hate the online debate in these things, because I think it always just ends up pissing more people off and rarely changing anybody's opinion. Like, that's usually the outcome. Almost nobody who goes into these debates has their opinion changed. And more people at the end are angry than they were at the start. So, like,
it's just a net negative for the world.
That's genuine, I think. And I think if you look at most like social media platforms and news outlets and stuff that have trended towards these like anger issues or whatever, because
rage baiting,
it gets clicks and it gets engagement or whatever, I feel like that tends to be the case. Like, very few people read stuff online or engage in debate online and ever change their opinion on it. It's a very small percentage, but the amount of people who get increasingly angered by these debates is a very large percentage, because that drives clicks and engagement and whatever. So, and humans like that shit. It's like soap opera, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this falls into that category of like, I guarantee you nobody engaging in this conversation has changed their original opinion by more than like 10%, but everybody has probably gained more than 10% of the rage in their soul at whatever fact they were arguing with some guy who disagreed with their opinion on it, Because you can always find that. You always find some guy who disagrees with you. Whether it's logical or not doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter who's right. Like, you're just going to disagree with each other and butt heads. So that's how I kind of feel about the general idea of like all these weird online debates. Doesn't mean you shouldn't state your opinion or it's not productive or like do what you think is right. But like, sometimes these online debate chambers are kind of spooky to me, man. Like, they're just spooky.
Yeah. And Quid did find somebody to disagree with him. Granted, there was more than one person, judging by the responses on the internet that I saw. Yeah. A lot of people took this opportunity to shit on Quinn. But a notable person in the community, a player, in fact, Parker. Because, of course, it's got to be Parker.
Yeah, I mean, like, you literally took probably the most toxic guy on the NA server for like 3 years, and then the most toxic guy on the SA/NA server for 3 years.
Yeah,
which is Parker, and literally had one of them say the other shouldn't be able to talk on the issue. It's like, I don't know what world are we living in? It's so dumb. Like, this is just not the debate either those guys should have gotten involved in. But whatever, that's a debate unto itself.
I mean, Quinn shouldn't get involved because, like as he has stated, he's tried to change as a person. All that.
Yes, I mean, like, they can get involved.
I don't think Parker has tried to change.
No,
judging not that we know his statement, which he said, from a person as toxic as you, who insults his mother and tells people to die, you should be outside protecting the discipline and shut your mouth. Quinn says, don't think my past actions are related in the least to somebody saying in person, face to face, they're going to hurt them. Pretty bad take, to be honest. Parker responds, the only difference between saying something online and face to face is that real men have the guts to say it live, while cowards only say behind the computer. Quinn follows up, no, there are a lot of differences. One of the main ones being the threat is immediate and something that can actually be done as opposed to it being just words. They are not even similar, and no manliness is involved. It's a matter of safety. So Parker, as the Quinn, is trying to represent the violence is, no tolerance, and we should not even stand for the threat of potential violence at these events. I think his argument there was a little weird because I'm not sure if I could be wrong about this. Quinn has been incredibly toxic online, no doubt. I don't think he's ever threatened any physical violence to anybody. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I would say that is probably where he should have made his stand, not necessarily about in person or online.
Yeah,
so there is an argument, absolutely, that having any sort of reactions like that in person, there is a difference because there is an actual, real, credible threat of physical violence, but it's still not okay to threaten people online either.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of places, like legal wise, if you threaten someone's life in an online environment through whatever type of messaging and it's substantial and you can trace it to them and know who it is, it's still illegal, I think, to some degree.
Yeah.
I will say, I also think there are, like, I think that's the one part. I think a lot of Quinn's takes are logical. I think he gets caught up because of his rep and everything, and that's bad. But I think he's basically just trying to say, like, nothing should lead to physical violence or the actual threat of physical violence in any medium. I think he'd probably agree with that statement. I'm not going to speak for him, but I think most people would. And that's kind of just like, that's it. We should just draw the line there. And if that happens, that's how it is. And comparing anything that might have caused that to have an increased chance of happening or whatever is a separate argument of like, okay, we can go fix that. But ultimately, it's in a class of its own.
And I think there are a lot of people who disagree with that statement, whether or not they like or dislike Quinn. There's a lot of people who do fall under the category of, I mean, it's it just sounds good, right? Talk shit, get hit. There's the Mike Tyson quote that goes around that everybody likes to talk about, right? Social media made y'all way too comfortable with disrespecting people and not getting punched in the face for it.
A convicted felon and not necessarily a good role model and a borderline psycho, sociopath, whatever you want to call it. This guy was not exactly the person to look to for inspirational quotes based on his character. Just like to point that out. You can go read on that on your own.
But it does speak to people. It does speak to people. Yes. And somewhere in their core, they're like, I agree with that. That they're like, you shouldn't just be able to say whatever the fuck you want and not get any sort of physical consequences for it. Mostly consequences. People think that there aren't any consequences, which is the problem. You don't see any consequences until there are physical ones a lot of the time. So it's just like, this guy can't just be allowed to say whatever the fuck he wants about me, my mom, my family, whatever, right? Disrespecting me, disrespecting my family, my culture, whatever it is. This guy does need to get some consequences. So, and I feel like, it's an emotional argument that speaks to a lot of people, as seen from the
I think it is a very
reaction.
strong emotional argument, but I actually think there is a real argument in there to some degree. And the part I'll say is that, like, it's like the same argument that people argue with free speech. Like, where does your free speech begin and end? Right? Like, it's the old argument of, like, can you go in a movie theater and scream fire as part of your free speech if there's no fire and someone gets trampled on the way out and dies? Like, most people would say that's not your right of free speech to do that. Like, you can't go and just say things that cause people tangible harm, knowing that that's a real risk of you doing that and can probably happen and likely will happen, and be like, well, I'm just saying a word, blah, blah, blah. Like, things like that can have real consequences. And I think most people would err on the side of, like, that shouldn't really be allowed, right? It's the same idea of, like, making bomb threats or things like that, right? Like, you can cause real physical harm by doing these things, even if theoretically you're allowed to say whatever you want. So there are lines in places. And I think the Dota part of this is an interesting one, because in theory, if you're someone who's in pubs and you're just being toxic and trash talking people all the time, and maybe you're encountering the same people because you're in a very high bracket and there's only like 1,000 top players or whatever, and you're like really laying into people, it is a form of almost verbal abuse, right?
Mhm.
You are taking a toll on someone's mental health, whether you think it's justified or not, whether you like it or not, whether you're intending it or not. You are on most levels. Like, you're making someone's life a little more miserable, probably, and you're probably wearing down their mental health a little bit. And it's hard to pinpoint how concrete these things are, but that's kind of what I generally believe. It's going to have a net negative effect. And you add that up over time, and it's kind of like, should someone be allowed to go in games and just do that repeatedly and repeatedly if we know about it over and over and inflict mental abuse on a community who's being held hostage to it? Now, that's the big caveat here, is like, are
Mhm.
you actually held hostage to someone? In Dota, I don't think you theoretically are. Because one, no one's forcing you to play the game.
Yeah.
Two, if you are kind of forced to play the game, or it's like your job or something or whatever, or you want to be able to play the game a lot, you can mute people. Like, you can go in a game, and if someone's verbally abusive, you can mute them and never have to hear another word from them again, right? There's no forced interaction you have to have with the guy. Now, if the guy then goes like out of Dota and starts stalking you on Steam or Facebook, I mean, that's like, then it becomes a legal issue, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different world. But like, in theory, nobody's holding you hostage to people who are going out in Dota and trying to verbally abuse people with toxicity and all chat and whatever. Um, so that's the part that's kind of weird to me. It's a very weird gray area, because I actually do think there's a real bad side to this verbal abuse that gets ignored a lot of times, because it's just like gaming trash talk and whatever. But that's not really true. Like, you go in these games and you have people. I'm sure everybody who's played Dota, I think, has trash talked a bit and received trash talk.
Sure.
Right. The degrees are very debatable, but like, I think everybody has done a little bit of that on both sides. I'm sure there's some saints out there who've never trash talked anybody, whatever. Congratulations. The game is very rage inducing. But I'm sure everybody who's felt and bent on the recipient end of trash talk knows that it makes you feel pretty fucking bad, right? Like, you can
Yep.
leave that game and feel really bad in your emotional and mental headspace. That is like, I'm not saying it's direct abuse, but it's kind of an indirect abuse. And I think that does have a real impact on people in their real lives. Like, it could mess up someone's day, which could have a snowball effect or whatever. You don't know where people are in their headspace, or
Mhm.
what they're doing. And that's not on you to know that. And it's not your responsibility. But like, that's where I go. If you're just shotgunning this shit out there, it's kind of, it's like, you have to know overall, on average, you're not having a positive effect. You are having a negative one. You have to take responsibility for having an average negative effect on a
Mm.
community that you're engaging in on a daily basis. That's the part of it I think is real. And I think people are frustrated with, because we've seen it exist and seen effects of it. And for pro players who are in the limelight, who it's their job, so they're like always interacting in this kind of small percentage of the community in this high MMR or whatever it is, there just never has really seemed to be repercussions for it.
Right. So the person who
Outs,
plays their average pubs, they're dealing with abuse and griefers and whatever, right? Because frankly, I feel like the behavior system for Dota has never been as stringent as I wanted it. And I feel like, a lot of people feel the same way. They're like, why do I have to deal with this? As you said, it's a very rage inducing game. And
right.
so they latch onto this, and the professional players that they see, and that's why people get so hopped up about the smurfing problem, right? Because it's not like they're interacting with any of these pro players that have these smurfs, right? 99.99% of these people have never interacted with a pro player on a smurf, because that smurf is 9k, 10k, 11k,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
right? They're not actually running into them, but they are dealing with smurfs, 5k guys on 2k accounts, right? That are just steamrolling the games, and it may be fun for them, but it's awful for the enemy team, right? And so this serves as a proxy for their own experiences with the game, whether it's smurfing, whether it's griefing or abuse in games. Same thing goes with like, I mean, Quinn, right? Like go end AFK in the fountain, right? Like that's another reason why people dislike Quinn, is because his history of doing that, right? It's always a proxy to their own experiences with the game, right?
Yeah, and I think people are just, there's a lot of frustration that has been ignored on some levels for a lot of time, and you could see that in these debates. And it's not, I don't think it's a lot of people being like, I'm equating the two perfectly evenly, but they feel
Yeah.
like one's being more ignored than the other. It's like when someone threatens physical violence, it's this big thing, and there's all this attention, and there has to be a solution, and there has to be calls for outrage and some penalty and all of this. But when someone can just say like vile racist shit on pubs for like years and years on end, it's just like whatever.
Mhm.
people are frustrated with that, and I understand that frustration. I think ignoring that is naive. It does not equate the two, but it at least equates that those two things exist. Like they both exist, which is what people want, I think, in a sense. Acknowledgement that they both exist. So that's, I think, the crux of this whole thing and why a lot of people are pissed is like you have certain people that lean more towards one of those than the other, and a lot of people who are arguing you shouldn't equate the two, which I think is true. But then you have a lot of people arguing that like there should never be any punishment for this online trash talk and threats or racism or whatever, and where are the lines for those and whose responsibility is to punish that. And that has just been a gray area debate for literally as long as I can remember, you know? And for me, at some point, I just muted all in Dota because I think it's the only step you can take. Like, as someone who has felt really bad, and I'm a pro player, and I have been flamed in high-level games and made to feel really bad. And I'm sitting there like, this feels really bad. And I'm self-doubting myself now or something or whatever, right? And I take that into the rest of my day. And I don't fucking want that. Even if it only happens in one of 100 games. Like, I don't fucking want that in my life. At some point, I made that decision. And I don't want to be the guy who gets caught up in that shit because I have trash talk people in games. You know, I'm not someone who has gone out and said like in crazy shit. I'm not telling people to kill themselves or saying racist things or whatever.
Sure.
But like, I have been very frustrated in Dota. I've played 40,000 hours of this game. Like, there have been games where I hate fuckers. I told them to quit and I don't want to play with them and they suck and like all of these things, right? If you're a pro player in this game, it is very frustrating because you're in this environment, and I'm not justifying it, but I've been there. I'll admit it. And it was not a good point, and I regret it. And I wish I didn't do it. And I tried to improve it over time, and I think I did. But like, as someone who's been there too, I mute all so that I also don't get caught up in that at a certain point. I mean, now I don't think it matters anymore because I don't care. But when I was like trying to compete and play it, like that's another step you can take too. The point is there are things you can do to like fix this, but I think to sit there and be like, well, it just doesn't matter at all, I think is a little cheap, which I'm not saying is what Quinn was saying or any of these guys are saying, but I think people are frustrated that some people believe that. Like, you can just say whatever the fuck you want online and it's literally doesn't matter at all and you shouldn't have any consequences from it. That's kind of cheap, I think.
Sure. And so would you say that much like the how you just mute all chat, that maybe the best solution is just not to engage with this sort of thing at all?
You mean the trash talk or like
the drama, any of that?
I mean, if you don't have anything concrete to add to the discussion or a personal viewpoint that you feel can add context or experience to the discussion that can help people learn from it or improve the context, then like probably not. But that's like all social media. People just like to say shit online.
Yep, and that's exactly what we do on the show. That. So we're going to move on to chapter 2.
What am I doing? Like, does my opinion really help on any of this? I don't know. I'm trying. Actually, what I'm trying to do in this episode, because I knew you were going to bring this topic up, right?
Like,
obviously, and I thought about it all week, and I didn't want to sit here on an episode and tell people to like, here's what I think about the X side of it and Y side of it and whatever, because I just don't think it actually does much. Like, you can go find those viewpoints anyway. I'd rather talk about things that I think I can at least add some contextual experience to, or maybe help people think about it in a different way, rather than like persuade people of an opinion. You know, that's all. Like, maybe just explore some of the nuances of this thing that I think are interesting for a discussion, and that's it. I'm not saying people should believe one way or the other. I don't know. I think there is some interesting discussion to be had about some of the nuances of it and explore them, and that's all. So yeah, that was my goal.
Well, I hope you are going to give your opinion on the rest of it, because we still have SoNNeikO's side of the story to talk about. I feel like we may have talked about the big picture here, but it would be unfair to SoNNeikO just to not deliver his statement at all. Though, personally, I'm pretty sure that his statement is... Well, we'll just go over it. So he put out a big old statement. He said he was going to take some time to write it up, and he did. He wrote up a full thing with 10, 15 paragraphs worth of backstory that goes into all of this. I'm not going to read the full thing, but yeah, it starts with him being called brain dead. And he does say that he messaged him on Twitter. SoNNeikO says, but I didn't threaten him physically, And I'm sharing screenshots here to show what was actually said. So what he actually said was no physical threats here. Whenever I meet you next time at LAN, you will stop type in chat, I swear. A little smiley. If you don't have brother, then I will teach you how to become human. Mar responds, XD, what's your problem, big man? Then he goes on to put the SoNNeikO's Liquipedia achievements, where at the bottom you could see their placements. So the qualifiers that SoNNeikO's teams had recently played in, where he is not qualifying for lands. He said, good luck, by the way. Please like, and then he comes back 5 minutes later, says, please like my last post, my friend. So SoNNeikO comes back and says, I don't have problems, but probably you live in some child planet and your parents didn't teach you well good manners, but it's okay for a while. Brain dead typed in chat to me. I just save it and show you when I meet you. I hope you tell me the same to my face, not using Twitter. So of course, good luck to good luck, you two. And then Amar can't stop himself and he puts his the SoNNeikO's, I believe, TI 11 placement. Said, good luck to you too. Ha ha. SoNNeikO responds, will be fun to see your face, smile. I don't even think that apologize will help you, double smile. And Amar finishes with, it's okay to be bad, no need to be jealous. So Amar just always has to have the last word in those things. So right away, SoNNeikO says there's no physical threat there. But he is technically right. But I think anybody would take that as a threat of some kind. Yeah. Probably physical. Don't think an apology will save you. What
does that imply?
Yeah, that absolutely implies that words will not be the be all end all of our meeting. So what else is there?
Yeah, I think the implication's pretty clear.
Unless the implication, I'm gonna beat you in Dota because you said that, which is highly unlikely.
The thing is, though, like, I feel like the amount of times pro players have said to each other, I'm gonna beat your ass on LAN or whatever, like when you show up, I'll punch you in the face. This is not the first time someone said that in DM.
Oh yeah.
And I guarantee you the ones we've seen, it's probably 10% of all the ones that have ever existed. So, like, I actually don't think people's issue is with that. Whether it should be or not, I don't know. But, like, I almost think it's irrelevant that he said that shit back in a DM because it's, like, not... It's no more real than any of the online stuff.
Because so many times people have said this sort of thing and it doesn't actually result to any physical violence.
Right.
That ultimately people cool off, and when they see each other on land, they don't actually try and fight each other.
Yeah, I mean, all these things are contextual, and I feel like in the context of Dota 2, if someone said, I'm going to meet you on land and punch your face, my first thought is not they literally mean they're going to do that. As weird as that might sound. Now, if you do feel like they actually mean that, then you should take it seriously and do something about it, right? And I don't think it's good that the person is saying they want to do that. But like, there is a world where you have to put that in the context of 10 years of Dota history where it's probably been said 10,000 times and players have been told this shit over and over and over and nothing happens of it. And it gets a little, I don't want to say dehumanized, but like it gets normalized, I guess, which is not good. Definitely shouldn't be. But I could see an argument in terms of like, yeah, I told him I'm going to like beat him up at LAN, but that doesn't actually mean I'm going to go to LAN and beat him up. It's just like, it's a level of escalation chat wise to try and convey the seriousness of how much this guy's pissed you off.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy that argument 100%, but I think it's an argument a lot of people would make. Actually threatening him or doing whatever he did at LAN is the issue here because obviously it escalated into something and he has beef that goes beyond just the words or whatever. So I don't know if SoNNeikO's defense is really that. I don't know if I buy it that well. Because it's like pretty clear he got really frustrated and he implied he was going to do something more than just talk to him, whatever that meant. And something obviously did happen that was more than just talk to him. So, like, I don't really know what you can say against that. Like, there obviously was some sort of implication and some motive to do something. which I think is condemnable and needs to be penalized. Once again, though, I will point out the caveat here of the continued antagonization of like maybe Amar has learned a bit, but like once again, if I felt like I was talking to someone and I really pissed them off and they were like a psychopath and they were gonna, the next time they came to land, they were gonna beat my ass, I would not continue to further antagonize. Just saying, just putting that out there as life advice. Like, so probably not, some guy's like, I'm going to come to your house and murder you. And you're like, yeah, good. Wish you could try. It's like, it's just like, it's a dangerous game, man,
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know what people are capable of or what's going on in their lives or how hinged or unhinged they are or whatever. I'm not even speaking on SoNNeikO. I'm just saying it's like, you have to recognize that a little too. So I will point that out. It is not a justification. It's not but it's like, it's in there, and it does make me question a lot of judgment in these areas. But that could also mean that it was viewed as not friendly banter, but banter. That's what I'm saying. This stuff in Dota has been so normalized. I'm telling you, it's like, it's disgusting on a lot of levels that it's that normalized. Like I think as a pro, you could message another pro like, nice fucking Viper or dumbass, and be like, oh yeah, come say that to me on land. It's like, okay, I will. I guarantee you that is a conversation that has happened like 10,000 times in like the last 5 years, right? And it is normalized, that type of interaction, to where if you hear that as a pro player, you're like, whatever. That just means we dislike each other, but it doesn't mean this guy's actually going to beat me up at land.
Sure.
So the fact that has been normalized is like fucked up. That's fucked up in a lot of ways. And that might feed into this. Like, I legit think there's a part of players viewing this that could, whether it's on SoNNeikO side or ATF side or whatever, that view these types of interactions, and maybe this one in particular, as like, there wasn't an actual threat and they didn't think it was going to escalate, and maybe ATF thought SoNNeikO was joking more than he was, because that is a normalized thing that happens more often than I think people think. So like, it's kind of fucked. I don't know what you do about that, but
yeah, and it obviously has become a thing because somebody else, SoNNeikO, apparently had an interaction with somebody else outside of this. But you keep going with SoNNeikO's side of the story. So he sum it up. He confronted Amar at some point, face to face. He said he approached him in a friendly way, put his arm around his shoulder, which Falcons, obviously that happened. There's literally a picture of him with his arm around Amar's shoulder. Falcons say that it was threatening. Like, I think we've all seen that situation where that is both friendly and hostile, right? The guy who puts his arm around your shoulder, it's the threat of like, I'm able to touch you and you're not able to do anything about it, sort of thing. But I'm not actually threatening you. There's always that like, oh, I wasn't doing anything there. And then there's actually, actual friendly ones. So
only the people there know.
Yeah, exactly. Only SoNNeikO ultimately knows. But he says that he did that, and he asked Amar, do you even remember why we had this conflict in the first place? And Amar said, yeah, I remember. You're brain dead. Which, again, Amar, even in person,
that's what I'm saying, dude.
Can't help himself, but
I'm telling you, something for me just doesn't add up. Like, if this guy was really threatened and he felt like he's gonna get physically harmed, this guy was a psycho, why are you continuing to antagonize him before, during, and after the incident, right?
The fact that, like, in SoNNeikO's statement, it wasn't like, yeah, I remember, I called you brain dead. If he actually said, yeah, I remember, you're brain dead, he is calling you brain dead again.
I don't know. That part is just that's baffling to me. Again, I'm not saying it's like, it's not that ATF necessarily did anything it's not like he did anything to justify physical harm against him, for sure. I'm not saying that, but like,
yeah,
man, the amount of antagonization this guy does is like, to sit there and be like, if you were at the butt end of that, it wouldn't be incredibly frustrating and push you to some limits, is like naive.
Yeah.
So that part is just astounding to me. But obviously a lot of the intention here and the context is only known by very few people, which is why I don't really like speculating on it. But
yeah,
the whole thing's just kind of stupid in my opinion. Like, I
it
think
is. And it gets stupider because SoNNeikO then says, basically he asks him like, "Hey, can we talk outside?" And of course, we all have seen that situation where you want to take this outside, right? That obviously means, do you want to fight? Or it could mean, hey, I just want to have a one-on-one conversation with you. It is really funny, like how all of these things, when said, could actually be one way or the other. Just what you want to believe or not. Because from SoNNeikO, part of SoNNeikO's background is they're both Muslim, which ends up becoming a very important fact to the conclusion of this story, at least currently the conclusion of this story. He thought they would have some sort of common ground and want to be able to talk this out. That's what he claims. So he thinks that, we could step to the side, talk this out one-on-one, and then his statement is that Falcons basically all react to this really negatively. Amar starts yelling, "Punch me, go ahead, punch me." The Skeeter calls him a bitch, keeps pushing for a fight. Then later he says that, like, okay, so he talked to the Falcons manager. It seemed like they were all good there after their conversation. Then later he goes into the bathroom and like Skeeter ends up there, and Skeeter ends up saying some shit. And then Skeeter ends up cursing out the PGL reps, and it was just a whole mess that follows up the rest of SoNNeikO's statement. So yeah, like he has his thing. Obviously, people are doubtful of his stance on how things went down because of the fact that, well, I mean, apparently SoNNeikO has a bit of a reputation already, but also like linking the DMs and being like, there was no threat of physical violence, when like most people would read what he wrote as a threat of physical violence already calls like everything else he said into suspect, right? But then to follow this up, just one more thing, which is Skylark comes in. Skylark is currently playing for Alliance, right? Or no, he's not playing for Alliance. I don't know who he's playing for. But he comes in and says, he at SoNNeikO and said, "This is why you came at me at the elevator with your boys yesterday asking why I tip you, intimidate me. Lamau, your team said you're trolling, but I guess they're just ashamed of you acting like a child." So SoNNeikO has apparently had another interaction with somebody at LAN. So that calls more into question his statement of like, hey, he's just trying to make peace. Which leads us to chapter 3, where there actually is peace. At PGL Wallachia, we have Navi, we have Alliance, and we also have Nigma, who are somehow going to come into the middle of this. SoNNeikO posted a picture of him, Kuroki, and Amar, all with their arms around each other, and he states on Twitter, "We resolved the problem. Thanks to Kuro for helping us talk things out. As soon as we actually got the opportunity to talk, we could resolve the problem in just a couple minutes. Next time, I will be able to handle situations like that better. Let's play Dota and have fun."
Good job, boys. Good job. Talked it out like men. And easily fixable, which I think most problems in the world you can fix by talking it out, but people are rarely willing to. It does help to have a third-party moderator, honestly.
Yeah, and somebody who, again, SoNNeikO stated that they're both Muslim, which he thought there was going to be common ground. Well, if anybody doesn't know, Kuro is a devout Muslim and takes that very seriously. I don't want to spill too much, but I believe like he donates a healthy amount. Like he actually walks the walk, he is very, very devout in that regard.
It's a big part of his character.
Yes.
And a big part of his journey in Dota as well.
Yeah.
Those things are not exclusive. So, yeah, he's probably the guy to do that if they both felt that was the common ground. Big props to him if it actually helped. It's a good thing to do.
Yep.
Good to recognize your place in community and be able to use it for some good and help people mature or whatever. Hopefully that is what happened.
Yeah. I mean, he's older. he's a legend of the scene, right? Very well respected for his accomplishments within Dota, even if his accomplishments of late have been clowned on. I think most players would look on him as being, one of the greats of the Dota 2 ecosystem. And obviously, he is a very devout Muslim. So, like all three tickers, he's just like, he's the more mature, responsible person, and probably somebody they might look up to. Don't know if they actually do, but kind of serves as the
Dota
perfect
pros
person
really
to
look up to anybody, to be honest. But
True.
as good as you can get, I'm sure ATF's going to go in a pub and trash talk him the second he gets, you're 5 so bad, whatever. A weird conclusion to this whole thing. I did not think it was just going to magically go like that. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess the real question is like, what do we learn from any of this?
Nothing. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think Skeeter comes off looking too good, based off of at least SoNNeiko's statement. I don't know what Skeeter also said. Basically, he was trying to defend his teammate, and he'd do it again. He didn't back down whatsoever from that. But what did we learn from this? Well, I think the bad lottery thing they were talking about is probably the most you can learn from this. You talk enough shit and, you might piss off the wrong person. You may take it far enough to do something about it. Didn't happen in this case, really. There was some shoulder touching, but no actual physical violence.
That's like a big part of human life in general, is that you should just... It's usually better to live your life in a way where you give people benefit of the doubt or grace, because you don't know what's going on in their lives. Like, you don't know where other people are. You don't know how good or bad they have it. You don't know how healthy or unhealthy their current mental or physical state is. That could be due to factors outside of their control. Mm-hmm. Like, you just don't know, right? And they can be a really good person having a really bad time. They can be a bad person having a good time. Like, you don't know any of these things. And so when you interact with other people in life, being a good person just means giving people some patience and some benefit of the doubt, so that if they're at a bad point or they're having a bad day or whatever, like, you're not going to pile it on, And I think in Dota in particular, because it creates an environment that's high stress and very toxic by nature, and puts people in a position where they're already going to be pressured and tested, that brings it out very quickly and very swiftly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly if you're a pro player, it adds another level of stress, right? Like, you have to play this game that's already stressful and puts you in that kind of environment, and then you add another layer of an environment on top of it, which is orgs behind you and a lot of money and a lot of big pressure tournaments and life-changing stuff. And I think that is worth recognizing. And I think it's better if you can recognize that you're going through all that, but all these other guys are going through it too. And not everybody has everything going as well for them in their life as you might in yours, or you might be the guy who's having a really bad day and lashing out at other people. And so, like, just help each other out and be willing to look past that. And it's not an easy thing to practice or learn or do. I'm not sitting here preaching to people, but like, I do think that is at the crux of this story a lot. And it's a really important thing to learn and try and practice in life, I think. I believe so. I mean, everybody can make that decision, but at least that's how I believe it. And the other factor, I think, is that I think a lot of people are going to come, like, I asked, what do people learn from this? I honestly think the biggest thing that a lot of people are going to take away from this story, at least public perception wise, I could be wrong on this. It's not necessarily my belief, but I think a lot of people are going to come away from this, from like the Reddit and the social medias and whatever, just thinking these pro players are entitled little bitches. Like, that's what I think most people are going to take away.
Are they wrong?
Regardless of who they agree with in the situation. They're just going to be like, God damn, these kids are just, they're just like entitled. That's all. I think that's like going to be a takeaway for a lot of people, honestly. And I think there are some entitled pro players for sure. I think there's entitled people in all areas in life. I don't think it's a Dota thing. Yeah. I think when you have a lot of success, you make a lot of money, and you're very good at what you do, it's hard to not have a sense of entitlement, especially when you're super young and you haven't necessarily experienced like losing all that and having to re-earn it or stuff like that, right? That can build humbleness. So it's not their fault. I'm not even saying all these guys are entitled, but like, it definitely comes off in all these situations. Like, anytime I see these pro players battling about this shit on social media, it just feels so, I don't know. I don't know what the word for it is, but it just feels maybe pedantic or infantile or entitled or whatever. Like, you know, I go back to like ATF's continuing antagonization of this guy, like during this whole thing. It's just like they feel untouchable. I think there's that sense in a lot of pro stuff. Like if you go to other pro sports and stuff, like or politics or business, like the billionaires, right? These kind of global trends we're seeing where people just feel untouchable. People don't like that feeling. Like they don't like that someone can feel untouchable, whether they're above the law or above society's cultural norms, or they're above the rules of the game or whatever it is, right? If they can use their money or their power or their friends to get them out of trouble, always, like, people really dislike that feeling. Whether it's real or not, they dislike it. And I think sometimes the Dota pro players, they're definitely in that type of category, and they can sometimes come across like that, and it pisses people off. Like, I guarantee you, there's a lot of people who watch this shit that are just like, fuck this guy. Like, he's an enemy for life now. This guy's such a baby. This guy's so entitled. This guy's such a little bitch. This guy, he's this multimillionaire squabbling about fucking what. It's like, that's honestly, I think, going to be, you're just going to have more people who think like that, honestly. I don't think most people actually learned something that's going to change how they view their interactions.
I will agree with you on maybe like the silent majority, but I don't think anybody is. I don't think too many people that walk away from this are still invested enough to go and write a comment about that. So what mostly what we'll see is people taking away from it is going on one side or the other, which is,
oh yeah,
there should be physical violence to your actions and what you say, or there should never be any physical violence.
Yeah. I just don't think any of those people have changed their opinion.
Yeah,
is my point. So, like, they didn't learn anything, right? The guys who came in on side A or B are still going to be on side A or B.
Yeah,
that's how most of these like polarized discussions.
All they learned was that they like one person more and they hate one person more.
Exactly. Which is why I'm saying, on average, I think you combine those with the silent majority. I think the only real outcome is that most people on average probably just think pro players are slightly more entitled, bratty, whiny, whatever. Like,
sure.
Which, it's not entirely unjustified, because like I said, I think there are some, but there are definitely some who aren't, and there are some really humble, hardworking people. I think we had some win TI this year, right? I'm not going to name specific names, but like, I think there are some really good pro player, really good people out there.
Yep.
That everything I know about them and have other people vouch, or like they are great role models and people to look at and be like, damn, they really worked hard and got where they are, and they're humble and they don't talk shit and they're not involved in this stuff. And they're just good dudes, right? Those people exist for sure. And there are a lot of the other kind. And I think that's generally how humanity is. There's a lot of flaws and stuff. But you can't just you can't bunch them all together. And I think things like this kind of, they poke holes in the people who bunch everything together.
All right. Well, I think that is a pretty good place to be able to wrap up this episode, because everybody knew what this episode was going to be talking about. We talk about the current events of Dota 2 and what's going on. And that's what happened this week. Hopefully there are no more updates to this story, as it seemed to have gotten a really nice conclusion with Kuro stepping in and helping to resolve an argument between two people on two different teams. And we are going to, so we haven't done the questions because we have had obviously some jam-packed episodes lately with TI ending and any drama that's happened and blah, blah, blah. So if you have a question that we still haven't answered, or a new question that you would like to have Avery and I answer, let us know in the comments below. Let us know any of your opinions on anything that we said here today. And we'll see you guys next time for another episode of Not for Broadcast. Goodbye. Don't get any fights. Don't fight people.